is the cyber.org Cyber Society AICS scenario, and we are going to highlight our blackout scenario today. And we are so happy that you're able to join us for this PD. Before we get started, we just want to take a moment to introduce ourselves so you know who is going to be presenting with you for the next hour and a half. So I'm Charlene. I've been with the curriculum department at cyber.org for about 4 years now. And prior to that, I have over 20 years of experience as a former teacher and an instructional coach, and I truly love that I'm still able to provide support to teachers through the work that we do here at cyber.org. I'm coming to you from our home office, which is in Bossier City, Louisiana, and I am joined by my fabulous coworker, Jess Hexel, and I'm going to take a moment and let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I am Jess Hexel. I am coming to you from California. I am not in our home office. I am one of our few remote team workers. I have been on the curriculum team at cyber.org for about 6 months now. And I also came out of the classroom. I was about 12 years teaching high school math and computer science, and am really enjoying this shift. Still working with teachers, still supporting students, but in a different capacity, and looking forward to learning with you all this evening.
Thanks, Jess. And I've put both of our email addresses into the chat. So we hope that you'll feel comfortable reaching out to us if you have any questions after this PD, or maybe a few weeks from now or a month from now as you choose to implement this in your classroom. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to start with just a very brief overview of our Cyber Society course. This is the course where you can find all of our AICS scenarios, and then a quick overview of AICS and what that entails. And then we'll move into our blackout scenario. And this is one of our AICS scenarios, and we're going to allow you time to work in breakout rooms together so you can go through these documents and discuss them with your team. There are 3 briefing folders. We're going to move really quickly. An hour and a half is a very kind of short amount of time for us to do this. So you'll have enough time to at least look at the documents, discuss the documents together in breakout rooms, and then we'll bring you back for some discussion on your documents. And then at the very end, if your group would like, we'll invite you to make a presentation of what you found. I'll explain more about that in a moment. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So the objectives of this PD. First, we want for you to understand the AICS blackout scenario. It's important to us that you gain a thorough understanding of the structure of all of our AICS scenarios. And in this case, we'll do that through the blackout scenario. Also, to role play in cybersecurity education, we want for you to experience the role of DHS agents in an interactive cybersecurity scenario and have an opportunity to analyze evidence to solve a simulated national level threat. The third PD objective is collaborative problem solving. We want for you to collaborate with your peers, with other educators, to investigate the blackout cyber scenario while using critical thinking. Really important, number 4, classroom implementation techniques. You'll learn strategies to adapt and implement the AICS unit in your classroom, ensuring students engage in hands-on scenario-based learning. And then last, discuss ways to enhance student engagement. Discuss best practices within your group for using these scenarios, and then help to make cybersecurity education engaging and relevant for your students. So this is going to be a really great PD, great time together. So our AICS scenarios are found within our Cyber Society course. The modules here in Cyber Society, they're designed for middle school and high school students, but the intent of Cyber Society is to enable teachers to use liberal arts concepts and ideas as an approach to increase cyber awareness among their students. So these modules, as you can see, offer a wide variety of topics such as law, ethics, terrorism, communication, and business as they pertain to cyber and cybersecurity. So within cyber society, we have our AICS scenarios, and AICS stands for Analysis and Investigation of Cyber Scenarios. And in these scenarios, students take the role of DHS agents as they investigate realistic scenarios that are related to cybersecurity that have potential impacts nationwide. So students are going to analyze briefing documents that are related to some event that occurs. And they're going to sift through the files to find what is pertinent and what is important. And then at the end, teams will prepare a briefing to present on who they think is responsible, what the motivations were, and then what the United States response should be. We have 8 AICS scenarios that are available to you in our Cyber Society course. We have international hotel lockdown. That's the first one there. And then we have catching the leakers, protests in Chicago, aliens, Malpasset Dam, Quasar satellite, blackout, which is what we're going to do today, and then the bridge. If you've done an AICS scenario with us, you've probably participated in Malpasset Dam. That's a fantastic scenario to start with. Blackout is another great one. That's a little bit shorter in length as there are only 3 briefing folders with this scenario. And so this, what you're looking at is a screenshot taken from our LMS of the first 4 modules, which are international hotel lockdown, catching the leakers, protests in Chicago, and aliens. And you'll notice that as the way these are organized underneath the module name, there are several teacher notes and briefing folders. Every one of our scenarios has a lesson 0, and lesson 0 are the teacher notes. So those are kind of the tips in running the AICS scenario that are meant for the teacher's eyes only. And that's really important because some of them will contain the answers to the scenario, what the writers intended for students to come up with as a conclusion. And that's often also found in the very last briefing folder, teacher notes. Next, there are teacher notes, lesson guides that follow for each of the briefing folders. So you'll notice here that it's highlighted lesson 1 across, and then teacher notes and briefing 1 folder. The briefing 1 folder contains all the documents that students will need for the first briefing. And then underneath it, each of the other briefing folders are organized the same way, where you have teacher notes and then the contents for briefing folder 2, briefing folder 3. And you'll notice at the very end here with aliens that there are actually 5 briefing folders. So this is one of our more robust scenarios. And then also for lesson 5 here and lesson 6 in aliens, there is a presentation rubric that is available to you if you'd like to use that as a way to grade students as they present what they believe happened at the very end of the scenario. And so here, if we look a little bit closer at an example of lesson 0 in the teacher notes. So if you were to click on teacher notes there, this is what's on the side is what would pop up for you. I'm going to move here so you can have a little bit more of a zoomed in view. So these are the notes that contain the objective of the scenario along with what we consider the rules. And these are consistent for all 8 scenarios. Some of the key points here, students are going to be tasked with coming up with a workable solution to the dilemma or the situation that's occurred. Students should be doing all of the work. In the scenarios, the role of the teacher is to provide information and that information is provided in the form of briefing folders. Teachers should not help students solve or provide an overabundance of assistance in solving the scenarios. There is a provided solution at the end, but arriving at that solution is not always the primary goal. The goal with AICS scenarios is for students to have an opportunity to work together to come up with their own conclusion based on the evidence that they've gathered and discussed. And so it's really important as students are presenting for the teacher or whoever they're presenting to, for them to have an opportunity to ask questions and ask where they found that information. What are they basing that on? So they know that when they're presenting what they believe has happened, it has to be based on evidence. It can be based on their interpretation of the evidence, but they need to have something there to back that up. And also really important, the scenarios are 100% entirely fictional. They do incorporate some real world events that have happened, even some real names and groups, but students will not be able to Google the scenario and find out what happened. This happens in teacher PDs also, like right away, teachers will try to find information, some teachers, and then they'll say, well, wait a minute, I can't find anything on this. And it's that way on purpose. Those briefing folders contain all the information that they'll need. And then the next page of the teacher notes gives a description of the scenario for the instructor. So there's some background information there, some important tips and other things there as well. So you've heard me mention briefing folders several times. And what is a briefing? Students may have that question also. They may not be really familiar with it. They may have only heard it used just a few times. And so it's important to give them an opportunity to find out what a briefing is and to explain that to them. And briefings are used extensively within the government to provide information in order to make decisions, propose a response, and even to help prepare for meetings. In this AICS scenario, briefings are going to be used to provide updates on an incident that is developing. All of our AICS scenarios start with breaking news or some situation or problem that needs immediate attention. And we tell students that DHS is working quickly to gather evidence, and as the evidence is collected, it is presented in briefing folders. And those briefing folders are given to students one at a time. So I'll explain this here in the next few slides, but they're never, like you saw on the screenshots from where you can access the materials, that there were 3 briefing folders or 4 briefing folders for a scenario. And we don't give those to students all together at one time. They're handed out at different times. So we can tell students that, well, we're still gathering evidence. So right now, as I'm giving you briefing folder 1, this is all of the information that we were able, or DHS was able to compile at this time. And as we're continuing to gather information, then that will be provided to you in the next briefing folder. Prior to introducing the scenario and running this within your classrooms, just a few things that I think will be helpful. It's great to do this in small groups with 3 to 4 students. Often, if you go over that number, then there's not enough work to go around. So that's an ideal number. For your very first scenario, the first scenario students are doing, plan to spend about 1 hour per folder. So maybe about 1 class period per folder. And then allow time for discussion after groups analyze those briefing documents. And then the question is, do I want to do the briefing folders as printed or digital materials? So there are some strengths, some really great positives for each of these. So with the printed materials, and that's taking everything that's in the briefing folder 1, 2, and 3, and downloading that and then printing it out, organizing it into folders and distributing it. it forces teamwork, because if you give a group of 3 students just one folder, and that one folder has all the materials for briefing 1, then students are in a position where they have to share that folder. They have to talk with one another, since time is a factor for them to look through the material. They're going to have to listen to one another. So it's really important for teamwork. Annotate, for them to be able to write on the documents themselves, take notes, put sticky notes, that's important as well. And then it gives them a great break from technology. We have several teachers, cybersecurity teachers, who use these AICS scenarios when they feel like their students just need to step away from the computer for a little bit. Now, with the digital materials, it can allow those students who need the accommodation of having a material read aloud. It can read aloud to them, and then it also eliminates the cost of printing and supplies. When I was in the classroom, I did not have unlimited copies, and this may have been something that I'd have to really plan for and make sure that I could be able to provide enough copies. So digital materials is very easy in that aspect. But if you decide to go with the printed materials, some tips to help you out there. The documents should be printed and placed into labeled folders. And I have right here a example that a teacher shared with me. This is what she did for her students. She did not use folders, but instead just took very large sheets of thick white paper that she got from her art teacher. And she had her secretary download this confidential thing here, which she then printed on the folder, and she made these briefing folders herself. I think these look really great. What we use in our PD sessions, and what a lot of teachers use, because there are lots of extra manila folders within the schools, is this right here, and then they just write 1, 2, and 3, and that's really easy as well. But all the contents of the individual briefing folder should be put together and then distributed together. So right here, where you have lesson 1 and briefing folder 1, everything that is in this briefing folder 1 is what is going to be printed out and then put into folder 1 together. Everything in briefing 2 folder would go in that second folder together. Some of the documents do need to be printed in color. There are some maps that are really important, some images that will lose some of their meaning if they're not printed in color. So that's important to keep in mind. And then also for printed materials, you may want to be able to provide your students with sticky notes and highlighters that they can use to help annotate. And this right here is an image of one of the AICS scenarios where everything is printed out. And these would be examples of documents that would not have to be in color, but just so you can see that. And then digital materials. So the digital materials, the documents can be uploaded into labeled folders using, this evening, we're going to model that with Google Drive. And so I'll show you that. And you can see here that there are some maps and some images. And this is what I mean by some of those documents would have to be printed in color. Again, all the contents of the individual briefing folder would need to be placed together. And then that's what we're going to show you now. So before I move on and move us into the scenario, which I appreciate you patiently waiting for, are there any questions that I can answer? And also, Jess is monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you can send her a message through the chat or reach out to her privately, and she'll get those answered for you. So we're going to use Google Drive today, and this is kind of what it looks like on your end. So let me give you this link here, make sure everyone can access that. And the way that I set this up is I have a main folder for myself where I put all of the briefing documents and organize it into folder 1, 2, 3. And then within my main folder, I have a participant folder. And in your case, that would be for your students. And then when it's time for briefing 1, I move briefing 1 into that folder, share it, refresh your screen, and you can see it. And so if you are in that Google Drive folder right now, you should actually see briefing folder 1. I moved that in there before we got started. So if there's anyone who's not able to access that or you're not seeing that, just let us know. We're going to do these briefing folders one at a time and move you into breakout rooms when we get started. And you will look through the contents of the folder with your team. And then you decide within your team how you want to divide and conquer those documents in your folder. So you may say, all right, this first person take these first 3 documents, and this next person takes the next 3, however you guys decide you'd like to do that. And so now here we go. And so you've noticed the background has changed here. And so we are starting with our scenario. So today's date, we're going back in time. It's July 4th, 2018. The weather in Washington, D.C. is a relatively warm 85 degrees Fahrenheit with mostly cloudy skies and a south wind at 2 miles per hour. A little background information. Here is the location of DHS headquarters. And breaking now, DHS has been informed of a blackout affecting the East Coast of the United States. Stand by for an update from your case officer. We have prepared documents for you, and they are in the first briefing folder. This briefing is going to provide investigators with a set of news stories from the Central Time Zone related to the blackout on the East Coast. The briefing also includes documents related to the operation and security of the national power infrastructure. Your job with your group over the next few hours, not so much few hours, but over our time together here, will be to assess the scope of the damage and begin to gather evidence for why the incident occurred. Your job will be to identify what happened, who is to blame, why has it happened, and what, if anything, should be done in response.